Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvaroi. Okay, good morning, Chevra. Good night, Yantiv. Thank you so much for being here. As we jump back into Sefer Likutei Moharan with Torah Nun Vav B'siyata D'Shmaya. Today's shir is sponsored by Zev Klein, Likutei Nishmas' parents, Rivka Brayna Bas Simcha and Yaakov and Yahya, also for shidduchim Yehudis Adina Bas Elisheva Rochel, Dovid ben Fayga, Kayla, Yonatan, Shimon ben Hadassah, Ronit, Netanel ben Meechal, Mahnaz, Dovid ben Yael, Noach, Avraham and Raizel, Zev ben Rivka Brayna, and all the singles of Klal Yisrael. Also sponsored anonymously Nishmas Esther Bas Blanca Zuchron of Rochel, like her namesake, an exemplar of true royalty, also dedicated as a schus for a refuah shleima for Chaim Yehoshua and Chaim Miriam. Also sponsored anonymously the schus Chaim Apparel and his wife Pesel Bas Bloom Apparel and their children to be zechel lahamshich kedushas Eretz Yisrael b'karav mamish. Okay, so I miscalculated because I thought that yesterday morning was Tuesday morning. I didn't realize it was Wednesday, so I thought we had 2 days, and that's why I didn't calculate appropriately. We are going to try B'siyata D'Shmaya to actually finish this. It's doable, but we're going to have to move along, and so we daven for Siyata D'Shmaya before we begin that we should be privileged to finish Rebbe Nachman Shavuos Torah before Shavuos, all with Hashem's help. Okay, so a very quick review. We were learning yesterday about the way in which Machlekes L'Shem Shamayim had to do with the concept of, well, Shamayim, right? L'Shem Shamayim, that Shamayim is the Nekuda of Eish and Mayim, and the way to purify and to access that illumination of the Shamayim, so that the Shamayim is Mizukach, is cleansed and tahar and pure, was through the aspect of the Ruach. We spoke about Ruach, about breath, about breathing, opening the system. The whole blood flow throughout the body gets oxygenized in the proper way, and everything can function with vibrancy and vitality, and much like we said, like, water that's static, right? We'll get all kinds of things that build up on it, but when the wind is blowing and roiling and turning all the water around, things are cleansed, things are clear like the ocean, and that's how it should be within our system, right? Our psychological system, our physical system. When the Ruach is flowing, things are in the right way. Breathing, breath work, that opens everything up. And that's the Nekuda of the Yadayim, where on the one hand, static, when things don't move around, it's going to specifically build up in the Yadayim, because the Yadayim are Askani Yisayim. And so, in the system, a person who isn't living with Emunah, to live in the Bechina of Shabbos, in the aspect of Noach, in the aspect of being able really to recognize that life is not really under our control, and we have to go along with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan and to try our best to be able to flow with that, right? If it's not that way, then it's Yadayim Askanias. It's the hands that are below the brain. Hands that are below the brain is under the control of none other than our very own cells. And that can lead to Atzvus Ruach. That's the Inina Be'it Savin Techalna, right? Of needing to earn our bread, Be'it Savin, with Atzvus, the Bechina B'zeh Sapecha Techalechem. That's the Yadayim that are Askanias, and that's the Bechina of what Amalek, who's the embodiment of the Nachash, is attacking Klal Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu's Yadayim are Kfeidim, right? Because that's the impact of Amalek. What do you need to do? It doesn't matter. They're covered. You hold them above your head. You hold them above your head. That's the Bechina of taking the Yadayim Askanias, the Bechina of Emunah, the aspect of thinking that everything is just I have to control instead of letting go and letting God, like they say. And I take my hands and I put them above my brain, and I'm able to surrender, and I'm able to say there are certain things that happen in this life that I just cannot understand. I can't fathom it. But this is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unfolding history. This is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unfolding my own personal history. This is my story, and this is what it is, and it's for the best. And I have to go ahead and align myself with the unfolding will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The deep bechina that we spoke about is that when the hands go above the head, they don't stop being hands, right? And that was the Nekuda. The right is the right, the left is the left, but over there it's mamish unified in one, and that's the bechina of Kesser Elyon, right, where the right is still the right, the left is still the left, but the unity is so deep that you can't even refer to right and left on account of the degree of unity that's there, right? But certainly there's a bechina of unity among different aspects, right? And that's the nekuda of Kesser Elyon, being able to preserve Seifele Hiskayim, the Machlekes L'Shem Shamayim, where there are things that happen in this life that one doesn't negate the other, but somehow there's this mysterious, unfathomable hashra'ah, just a little revelation and perception of the unity that transcends both, that you're able to say, I'm able to realize and to feel and to believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here too. How? I can't give an explanation. I can't simply mitigate the Gevura by turning it into Chesed. Gevura is Gevura, right? Chesed is Chesed, but somehow there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's an Eibishter, the Echad Yachad Miyuchad, who is Kol Yachal, the Kol Lam Yachad, like we say in V'chol Maminim in the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur liturgy. Okay, so that's what we have been learning last time. Through Ruach, that's going to enable the blood to become oxygenized and flow in the way that they ought, that the blood ought to flow throughout the body. But that was how we get to the Nekuda, to the consciousness of Machlokes L'Shem Shemayim. So let's continue from there. V'zeh, says the Rebbe, here we are in Samach Zayin Amud Aleph, and this is the Bechin of the Pasuk, Neicha Nesalav Aveinu Al Kapayim, El Kel V'Shamayim. We want to lift our lave, our heart, to our hands, to our Kadosh Baruch Hu Bashamayim. Says the Rebbe, in this pasuk you have all these nekudas. You have the nekuda of the lave, right? That's the Indian of the ruach, of the doifek, of the pulse that is emerging and emanating forth from the lave. El kapayim is the nekuda of the hands, because that's where the ikar rectification is, to bring ruach into our yadayim. Again, it's a metaphor for yadayim askanias, right? We want to bring ruach into that. We want to realize HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. I'm enlivening my experience of life. Things shouldn't become kaved and heavy, because I don't have to carry it all. Hashem is carrying it. How do you carry things? With your hands, right? So the hands become heavy because I'm carrying such a big burden. I realize, no, there's ruach in my yadayim, right? Nissa levavenu, which is the pulse and the oxygen. El kapayim, what's that going to do? El kel bashamayim. That's going to have the impact on the nekuda of shamayim, eish and mayim, yad yamin, yad small, to lift the hands above the head, to do battle with Amalek, nachash, the Indian of B'Yitzavei Techalna, and tap in rather to the Nakuda, not of the 6 days of the week, which are days of work, but rather the Nakuda of Shabbos Kodesh, that is the aspect of Zeh Yinachamenu Mima'asenu Mi'itzvei Nidenu, the Nakuda of Noach, which is the Nakuda of Menucha, right? And that's Shabbos Kodesh. Okay, that's what we're trying to do over here. So Nisa Levavenu Al Kapayim Al Kel B'Shemaim Shetzarch Lisas Alev, says the Rebbe. A person has to lift the heart, Hainu Arach HaDoifik Shebalev, which is a reference to the oxygen that's flowing forth from the blood flow of the heart, and within the blood flow El HaYadayim, and I have to channel that to my Yadayim. V'zeh El Kel Bashamayim, and ultimately what this is going to do is affect the aspect of Shamayim. Kimizeh Nizdakech HaShamayim, and Shamayim is above. That's the Nakuda of, yes, it's Eish and Mayim, and Eish is still Eish and Mayim is still Mayim. When Eish is Eish and Mayim is Mayim, but they come together, you get Shamayim. Right? You could not have Shamayim if you didn't have the Nakuda of Eish and the Nakuda of Mayim. Both Nakudas exist, but they come together in this point of unity. Where? In the Shamayim, right? And that's where we're lifting our hands up to Shamayim and giving things over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we don't have to carry it all alone. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is walking with us, and He's going to carry it. Whatever challenging circumstance we have in our lives, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is helping us. It's part of His plan, and we're going to be okay. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help us to carry that burden. Okay, b'zebechinas, another pasuk in Devarim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking, Ki esal shamayim yadi, when I lift my hands to the shamayim. So the Rebbe says also, it's a Rebbe's in the pasuk, shetzarach lisas yadayim, same idea. We need to lift our hands, she'anasa mehem b'chinas shamayim. So that should be constructed out of them the aspect of shamayim. Kaniska le'el, like we spoke earlier, k'shemezachich yadayim b'chinas shamayim al yedei anacha. When a person manages through their own anacha, through their own breathing, getting oxygen in the system, making sure that the blood can flow in the appropriate way, and that the ruach can go through the whole system and blow away, like we said, all the dust and all the rot and all the schmutz that builds up over time. When we can do that, and we can cleanse the aspect of the yadayim, which is the nekuda of shamayim al yedei anacha, on account of breathing, which is the means through which the ruach in the lave is pumped throughout the whole entire body and ultimately brought to the aspect of yadayim, to that part of me that believes that I need to be carrying everything myself. What that does is that purifies and cleanses the inyan of yadayim and shamayim, and that's the pasuk that we're learning over here. That is the nekuda of machlokes, but it's l'shem shamayim, and that's the Rebbe Nachman is an even greater level of shalom than the lower shalom. The lower shalom is the shalom of das, where the two are able to mitigate, right, and then they just result in chesed, right? If you think of it, right, because das, what comes next? Let's say, right, it is something that's only one-sided, right, which is Yeah, and then Gevura emerges, but ultimately it's such a mituk, it's such a hamtaka, that from that all you end up seeing is chesed. It's a very deep thing, right? You have chachma and bina mina dinim nisarin, but what does it produce? Either das, right, or if you include kesser, right? So the point is it goes to one side. Kesser is not that way. Kesser goes to two sides. In other words, that itself is an externalized representation of what Kesser is, right? So from Kesser doesn't only go to one side. That's what you'd assume, right? Less small ba'atika, right? The Zohar says there's no left side in Atik, right? Okay, so how do you get a left side from no left side? What it means is that the level of unity is so absolutely unified that it's unfathomable to us. But ultimately, when you want to externalize Kesser, you're going to get Chachma and Bina. Then it produces Das. The lower level Das is where it's totally mitigated. It produces Chesed and Chesed alone, right? Kesser it's not mitigated. It's both. That's the unfathomable Emunah on the level of Kesser in the context of Torah and Vav. And that's what we're speaking about. That's Machlokes L'Shem Shemayim. So in order to get there, to that higher Shalom, said the Rebbe has to do with Shemayim. How so? Ki kol diburim mekablim min Shemayim, because all words we receive from Shemayim. Ki sham kol diburim, because that's where all the words are. The words come from Shemayim, very deep. Articulation, communication is all in the aspect of Shemayim. Kama shekasav la'adam Hashem tvarcha nitzav b'Shemayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your word echoes in Shemayim. And although the Baal HaTanya learns that means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's 10 utterances with which all of creation were created are maintained, right? And that means that no matter what part of creation you're referring to, it's the letters that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke. That's what's bringing it to life. Tad Shea Eretz, right, is all the vegetation, right? Nasa Adam. But whatever it is, every part of creation. And so from that perspective, Shemayim is just arbitrary, right? Because it's true about everything. But the Pasuk uses Shemayim. And so the Rebbe zones in on that and says, yes, there's an aspect of Shemayim which is particularly bound up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's diburim, from which all other diburim derive. And the way that the person is able to access these diburim emerge in the aspect of thunder. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will thunder in the Shemayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu thunders with his voice in wondrous ways. What's nifla'os? Pele. What's Pele? Is always Kesser. Right, so you see that there's an akuda of Kesser here that serves as the root for Das, serves as the root for Tiferes, which is also called Shemayim. Kesser is the root of all of it, right? On the highest darga, there's a bechina of thunder. What's the nakuda of thunder? Thunder, I mean, we know today with science for sure, right? Is when different winds, different airs, different temperatures are clashing, right? And that produces this sound called thunder. What's thunder? Thunder is a unified sound, but it's a unified sound that comes as a result of two things bumping together, and it's an overwhelming sound, right? Thunder can be overwhelming, and it's a revelation, such a revelation that we learned in Torah. Hey, it's supposed to, according to Chazal, be mafshet hakmimi shebalev. It should open up our heart a little bit. Now we're able to understand, because heart being closed up is an akuda, like we're learning, where there's no ruach in the system, right? The whole system gets closed. That was the bechin of chametz as opposed to matzah. Right, so this is very connected with Torah Hey and many, many other Torahs, but that Torah in particular. But once there's thunder, there's the bechina of the diburim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person's able to realize this is part of what Hashem is, the same Hashem who said, Anoichi Hashem Alikecha, said lo yiyah, right? There's mitzvahs aseh, there's mitzvahs lo yisaseh. The same HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the male, created the female, right? This is the diburim that created all kinds of opposites in this world. The dibur, which is described by the pasuk, I think we mentioned it earlier in the series, Achas diber elikim, although HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke one thing, shtayim zu shamati, right? I experienced two things. And there's a appreciation that on the subjective level, I experienced two things. And yet, I'm able to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke only one thing. I experienced two things. Again, we're not trying to pretend like the thing I experienced was somehow less than what it was. I experienced two things. One was very difficult, and one was very beautiful. And I'm able to realize in the Nakuda of Kesser Elyon by taking my two hands and lifting them up to the place where you would think should only be unity, but then you realize, no, in that place there's preserved the opposites, and that's the mystery. That's the mystery, that it's beyond my brain's capacity to comprehend. That's why I'm me, and that's why he's God, right? And that's the Nakuda of lifting my hands up and saying, it's beyond me, it's beyond my brain, I can't fathom it. Shtayim zu shamati, but achas diber elikim. That's the Ra'amim. That's the Ra'amim that's produced through the hot winds, the Bechina of fire, which is the Bechina of Gevura, and the cooler winds, which is the Bechina, or the cooler air, which is the Bechina of water, which is the Nakuda of Chesed. So the Ra'amim themselves are produced by this kind of rubbing together, this kind of conflict, and that produces a unified sound that's called thunder. And so thunder is correlated to this Nakuda of Diburim, that the Diburim come from Shemayim, and that produces the thunder. Ki hayadayim imechin Shemayim, because Yadayim, like we learned on the Nakuda of Shemayim v'Shem Kala Diburim, and all the Diburim are there. Like we learned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your words echo endlessly, forever in Shemayim. So it emerges that Dibur comes from the place of the Yadayim, which is the Nakuda of Shemayim. And that's where all Diburim come from. Diburim, in this context, means opinions. That's where all opinions come from. That's where all perspectives come from. What's Dibur? Dibur is relational dialogue, right? Where you have two people who are facing one another, right? Memela, automatically, you have two people who are speaking to each other. They're already taking opposite postures, right? Just by virtue of the way that they're standing. This one can see everything that one can't see. That one can see everything that one can't see. Why is that the case? Why shouldn't people speak to each other standing side by side with their mouth on this side of their face and that one's mouth on that side of the face? There's something Hashem built into the teva of the bria that memela in every dialogue. There's already the dynamic where I see things you don't see, you see things I don't see. Right? It's built into the context of dialogue, right? Meaning there's already a nekuda of opposites, even if they happen to be agreeing. Each one has a nekudas emes that they're able to bring to the table. This is what we learned in Torah Lamed Daled about each yid having a nekuda of that's yakar, right? That masha'in b'chavera that nobody else has, and they need to find that nekuda, right? We learned about. In the beginning of Torah Nun Vav, right? Every person has their malchus, their nekudas hamalchus, their ability to impact the world in a way that nobody else can. We have to take that very seriously, right? We have to find that, believe in it, bring that out, right? Be for others what we want others to be for us. We have to be that for others and for ourselves, but for others, right? And we each have to bring that nekuda pnimis out into the world. So that was the aspect of recognizing that automatically when we speak, we're saying something new. Because we're the ones who are saying it. And only we could say it in this way. Everybody has something to say. Because everybody has their own unique lives. Everybody sees the world in their own unique way. Right? You're not standing in their literal shoes. You'll never understand the world in the way that they understand the world. Therefore, you'll never be able to appreciate all the various circumstantial tensions that are causing them to act the way that they're acting, because you're not there. You're not them. And that's the way that it is tamid kacha, just by virtue of being alive. So diburim means that if I'm speaking, it already means that I'm saying something unique. And it means that the person that I'm speaking to will have an oppositional voice, will say something else. All of these diburim are mekabel min hashamayim. Because shamayim, like we said, is Eish and Mayim. That's the earliest iteration of opposites. It's the place of the Yadayim. It's the place of thunder, of hot wind, of cool wind. And things need to come together. Sometimes things come together where there's absolute agreement. That's das tachton, right? Or that's das, right? That's the lower unity, which is beautiful, and that's shalom and garza evim keves, because there's going to be a tremendous das revealed to the world, and people will be able to get it together and live side by side. Here, the Rebbe is telling us, though, about an even deeper shalom, where there isn't agreement, and yet, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chai. That's the highest kind of unity. It's beyond the kind of unity to say, oh, that was fire, that was water, and they came together and became something else. Yafeh. But that's not yet the highest revelation, because that's still a revelation that's lamata me'amoach. You're still able to grasp it. Everybody can appreciate the way that this note and that note, because they come from the same chord, if you sing them together, it produces harmony. Gewalt. Everybody's able to realize that. But to be able to wrap our minds, or not be able to wrap our minds around the notion that this note that has no shaykhis with it, they don't have any godly reason to be sung together, ever. And somehow, there's unity there too. That's the Shalom Nifla. That's the Nekuda of Kesser Elyon. That's the pinnacle of faith and oneness is dafka when the things cannot be integrated. This is something new that we've not learned in Rebbe Nachman so far. In Rebbe Nachman so far, everything's been very tidy, right? We say, no, everything has a reason, and we can move on with things, and Amunah and Simcha, and you can... Torah and Vav is preparing us really for Torah Samach Hey, for Torah Samach Daled. We get too far ahead of ourselves now, but Torah and Hey is the Hakdama really to Torah Samach Daled. In Torah Samach Daled, the Rebbe speaks about the Chala Hapanai, about the vacant space, and how real the vacant space is. It's the most radical teaching, probably, in the whole Likutei Moharan, and therefore very, very famous, or notorious, depends who you ask. But the Rebbe goes so far as to really remind us there that the Kav is wonderful. There's a thing called the Chala Hapanai. There is a void. And he describes questions that come from the void. The Napsha, we don't know the answer. They don't have an answer. From our perspective, they're answerless. Here he's giving us a little bit, and we're going to see that there, and we're going to learn. It's very connected. I mean, the whole sefer is connected. We're going to get there when we get there. I'm just laying a little bit of a seed in the brain, so that when we get there, we're going to be able to come back to Torah and Vav. But this is something else. There's the Daika, the greatest Gilui of Kesser Elyon, Dafka, when you can't put these two things together. This is the diburim that come from that place. And all the words, all the conversations, all the perspectives that emerge from there, which are the Nekuda V'Yadayim B'chinas Shamayim B'chinas Ra'amim, which is the aspect of Shamayim Eishin Mayim, which is the Nekuda Ra'amim, hot air, cold air. Ein Leganis HaSamakabel. We should not ever denigrate the Makabel, the one who received this Shirish Neshama that emerges from one of these two opinions, Af im ein halacha kamoisai, even if at the end of the day we don't end up agreeing with him. Because if this is his nature, if this is his Tchunas HaNefesh, that this is what his conviction is on a soul level, not pshat that he just onboarded this from somewhere else. Now he went through the sugya, and this is what he came out with. And he, mamish is l'shem shamayim. That's the nekuda. He believes that this is mamish, klape shmaya galia. He's clarified. He has no negias in the matter. He's willing to accept the truth where the truth is. Kabel emsim yishamer. This is what he believes. He was makabel min hashamayim. Misheshis and Bereshis, this was supposed to be his opinion. This was supposed to be his R that he has to reveal into the world, even if ein halacha kamaisai, and we go al pi roiv or ali klali hapsak, and this doesn't end up being the opinion that we choose, we have to respect it. V'al kein be'emes elu ve'elu divrei likim chayim. Shtayim zu shamati, achaz divrei likim. So why in the end do we end up choosing one over the other? Why in the end do we end up being mate klape chesed and looking for good things, and saying Baruch Daina Emes on the bad things and Baruch HaToiva Meitiv on the good things, and not really making HaToiva Meitiv on everything? Why don't we live in that reality, which we one day will, by the way, because the Gemara Pesachim tells us by Yemahu Hashem Echad Ushmai Echad Ve'idna Lavu Echad, and the answer is yes. Today we make Baruch HaToiva Meitiv on the good things and Baruch Daina Emes on the bad things, but also love we're going to make Baruch HaTeva Meitiv on everything, but right now we're not on that level. So we can't comprehend that. This is the Nekuda of thunder, Shemisham Kibel HaDiburim, where all the Diburim thundered out from. It's the thunder of Har Sinai, right? Where all the Aseres HaDibur is just, it's B'dibur Echad, Shaleim Nemar, about which it says, Yarim Hashem Kel B'Kayla Nifla'is. Again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu thunders in a way of Nifla'is. Taina Shehem Be'emes Niflis Tmim Deim. We can't grasp this. This is the point, the Nekuda, the earliest emergence of duality from the one, which is a point that we cannot comprehend. It's an inyan of Pele. Niflis Tmim Deim. Das Elyon, Das Tachton. Right? Kesser and the lower Das. This is Pele. We can't grasp it. We can't grasp this. And here the Rebbe brings it down into a much more practical perspective, not in an internal system, but literally machlokes between tzaddikim, where you have literal machlokes in l'shem shamayim, and you had tzaddikim who didn't agree with one another, but they, like we said, they were l'shem shamayim, mamish. Each one of them was mamish l'shem shamayim, be'emes. They have to be tzaddikim, right? Otherwise, it becomes a negias thing. They mamish believed what they believed, and that was what was needed for their time. L'shem shamayim. How do we understand it? How do we understand the Nakuda Machloike Shebein Tzadikim? Says the Rebbe, Zebachinas Darchei Hashem. This is the way of Hashem, She'iev Shalahasik, that really is just unfathomable. Hainu Bechinas Tzadik V'Toivlai, Tzadik V'Ralei. This is the Nakuda of why you have a Tzadik, which is Toivlai, and the Rebbe is going to interpret this in his own way, and a Tzadik V'Ralei, and it's Tzadik that it isn't going well. Rasha V'Toivlai, Rasha V'Ralei. Shafilu Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom Alei Hisik Zayis. Like the Gemara tells us, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to understand this, also Bikesh, I believe it's a Gemara in Brachas, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, Adi Eini Nas Trachach Hashem, show me your ways. And the Gemara says, what was that referring to? He couldn't understand Tzadik V'Toivlai, Tzadik V'Ralei, Rasha V'Toivlai, Rasha V'Ralei. Why is it this way, that there are people who experience different experiences in this lifetime? So the Rebbe interprets this in the context of Machlokes Shebein Tzadikim. Ki Tzadik V'Toivlai, what does it mean that there's a Tzadik who somebody else argued with him? But it ends up that in history, he ends up prevailing, right? And you end up seeing with the passage of time that history follows the pattern that he foresaw and not the pattern that the other foresaw. This is the tzaddik that in the end it appears that Shemayim was masking with him. That's the way the things unfolded. It was that hashkafa that the Am needed. Imloi Nevi'im, Hein B'nai Nevi'im, Hein Klal Yisrael themselves affirmed that what he was saying was emes and it was a davar no miskabel, right? Halacha k'maisai. And then there's tzaddik v'ralei. There's another tzaddik who just fades away into obscurity. Why didn't he have the mazel that this one had? Ein halacha k'maisai. Then he says, Rasha v'Toivlai is Zebachinas harasha shemakarav la'tzadik shalacha k'maisai. This is the Rasha who, it happens to be, but apparently min hashamayim, of course, min hashamayim, he ends up being a makurav to the tzaddik. That's halacha k'maisai. That's Rasha v'Toivlai. And then there's Rasha v'Ralei. Zebachinas harasha shemakarav la'tzadik she'ein halacha k'maisai. The Rasha that ends up becoming close to a tzaddik, that ain't halacha k'maisai. That the halacha does not end up being like him. Even Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't able to grasp this. This was the mystery of Hashem. This is the Nakud of thunder. They are wonders that emerge from the Tmim Deim, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is totally whole in his consciousness, which is impenetrable, impossible for us to be able to fathom. Therefore, when it's an akuda machlokes shebein hatzadikim, which is lishma, and going back to the simple meaning of the term l'shem shamayim, right? When there's an aspect of l'shem shamayim, when there's the nakuda of thunder, then ein legana say. You might disagree, but there's no inyan of being megana, because you come to realize I have to say this, he has to say that. It's very interesting when I have conversations with people, even if I feel that, they're not. I feel like I'm right. They're wrong. If I get the sense that they're mamish l'shem shamayim and this is what they mamish believe, I back off, because there's a appreciation and a realization that there are people in the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs them to have this perspective. That's it. I might say it's from my perspective, it's Rahmanas. I wish they would taste the sweetness of Pnimius. I wish they would really open their minds and so on and so forth. But if there's the sense that this is not stam like a shtuyot, a person's parroting somebody else's, the person went through this again, they came out with what they came out with, absolute respect. Absolute respect for that, in the same way that I hope that they'll respect the journey that I've taken and the conclusions that I've come to from trying to really try to understand what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants in this world. But that's an important nakuda, right? If it's l'shem shamayim, and this is what the person believes right now, every person is not only entitled, they need to believe that needs to be a voice. Okay, I hope it will be halacha k'maisi, and I hope that this vision that I have for the world, I really hope that that's what will materialize. Because I believe that it's the most beautiful and holistic and universal and geuladik, and based on everything that I know from the Sifrei Pnimis, that's okay, fine. That's what I hope. That's what much better than Gog Magog and nuclear weapons and bombing. Like why? I would rather avoid that if we can. So I really hope that the halacha is k'maisi and not like some others. Okay, that's what I hope, right? But at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in which there needs to be point and counterpoint. There needs to be thesis and antithesis. That there has to be that. But it has to be genuine. That's the Nakuda. It has to be L'Shem Shemaim. If a person is not L'Shem Shemaim and they just balikanta, they're just there to fight, and they don't actually care about Yiddishkeit, and they're just parroting back what they learned in 7th grade because that's what they learned, and and this is what it is, that's not the same Nakuda. But the people who mamish, the Satmar Rebbe comes to mind. Like, I don't know about the Hasidim, whatever, but the Satmar Rebbe was an Ish Kadosh V'Tahar, like, Ad L'Ma'od. He was a Malach Elikim Tzvakas. Huh? I said the Satmar Rebbe. I don't know about the Hasidim. The Rebbe, okay? The Satmar Rebbe, right? Rebbe Yoelish was a Malach. You read about his life. You read about the Kedusha and the Precious. He was a Goyin Olam. Like, he was a Tzaddik Hadaris, Rebbe Yoelish. His Shita was Kadosh V'Tar. I don't personally feel drawn to that. That's my Nekudas Ha'emes. That's my Sharash Hashama. And having gone through a little bit of the Sugya, I'm more knighted toward a different Shita. Okay, that's my, and even that's very nuanced, because it's like, it's either Satmar or you love Zionism. Like, it's like, there's nuance, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of nuance, right? Okay, but I'm knighted toward a different vision of what Eretz Yisrael could be. And what that process began. Okay, but Rebbe Yoelish's opinion is absolutely necessary in the mix. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world in such a precise way. You need these different perspectives. You need that. As long as it's L'Shem Shemaim. When it's L'Shem Shemaim, then Ein Laganos. Ein Laganos. Ein Laganos. You recognize, I need to say what and again, it doesn't take one iota away from your conviction. I need to say what I'm saying, and that person needs to say what he's saying. They're not going to agree. They don't come to agreement. Shalom Nifla. That's an even greater level of shalom when there's disagreement, and yet I can hold space for you and you can hold space for me, and there can be mutual recognition and respect. When I realize where you're coming from, I disagree with it, but I respect it. And you realize where I'm coming from. You don't agree with it, but you respect it. You understand? That's a mashu acher. That's not the Nakuda of the Das, Shalom, lower Shalom, where everybody gets along and sings Kumbaya, which could also be beautiful. This is a Shalom Nifla. Do you hear this? It's a Shalom Nifla. This is the Nakuda of Pele Elyon. Ultimately, there's going to be Halacha Kamaisa. Reality will unfold one way, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. In other words, at that stage in history, both were emes. Both were emes. You needed both. Guys, I'm addressing your question. You needed both. Emes at that stage. At that stage, you needed both. Right? As history progresses, the system will evolve. Now you need new ingredients. Now you need new data points. But for that moment in history, you needed these two shitas. They anchored each other. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Ein leganas. Machlekes l'shem shema. And that is the ultimate unfathomability of the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, is daika through this duality. There's a lot more to speak about here. We're in a bit of a rush. So gesund and stark. But that's what Moshe Rabbeinu tried to understand. That's the highest shalom that there is. The highest shalom that there is. And that's what Torah is. I'm saying the whole thing is a Shavuos Torah. And we're going to be Meechal the Torah, tomorrow morning. The whole Torah is machlokes. The whole thing comes about. The whole Judaism is all arguments, like the famous thing, like 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But why is it that way? Because that's how it has to be. It's a dynamic system, super dynamic. Imagine if everybody would agree. It's horrific, right? You can't have a Sanhedrin that all agrees. If everybody agrees, for sure that halacha is not that way, right? There has to be argumentation. That's part of the Jewish tradition. It's a core of the Jewish tradition, because that's the way that a Torah unfolds. This nation needs to be super duper dynamic. That's it, exactly. There's a rischa derais, there's a fighting, there's a machamta shel Torah. That's the way the Torah unfolds. Its dafka has to be this way, but it has to be with good midos. In other words, it has to happen in the appropriate context. L'shem shemaim. If it's not l'shem shemaim, then it ends up with fighting and screaming and yelling and throwing things at each other. Chas v'chalila, has milahaskir. That you already know immediately. It's off. But if it's mamish in the appropriate way, then this is the ultimate gilui of the Pele Elyon of the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world in such a way. Very quickly.
Calls it mitoso shel shloimo.
Yeah.
it's a that's where Shlomo Melech Shalom Shalom.
And right, Shlomo HaMelech. You're saying Melech. The Malchus of Shlomo HaMelech with the 60 or the 60 Mesechtes Malum de Melchama, right? Kulam Achuzecher. That's exactly it, right? That's the drush, I believe, right? That it comes with the Melchama. Nachon, right? There's a Macham Teshal Torah, and that's the Nekuda Malchus, which we're hopefully going to get to in a few minutes. So let's go a little bit more quickly. This such a deep. I mean, it's turn and vav. Can learn this forever. 4 pages. How many pages? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can learn it forever. 5 pages. So then we have to be very careful not to be megane. We have to be very careful to understand there has to be other opinions in the world, but it has to be l'shem shamayim, and it has to come from an educated place. Those factors. If those factors are there, everybody can do whatever they like. But it has to be those 2 factors. Even though, right, these 2 things are elu ve'elu, we can't grasp like how that could be. It's a pella of a topic. How could both be divrei l'kim chaim? They're saying the opposite. Where's emes? Emes is achdus, like we learned in Torah and Aleph. How do you have that? It's a pella. This is a pella. Niflois tmim dein b'chinas ra'amim kaniskar. La'el was that perish, and this is shot in the pasuk in Iya Baruch Hashemayim Shifra. Kadosh Baruch Hu cleanses l'shaper, beautifies Shamayim with ruach. Choyle la'yadei nachash bariach. His hand fashioned the bolt-like serpent. A bariach is like the bolts, right, or like the hinges. And the nachash, right, is like a vise. It's like a boa constrictor. It squeezes like a bolt, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand fashioned that serpent. Hein elik sais drach, the pasuk continues. These are some of his ways. How trifling, how small. Shemetz, we've heard nothing about him, right? The Ram Giburaisa Miyazbainen. Who could really be Mizbainen in the Ram Giburaisa of the thundering of his Gibura? Says the Rebbe, this whole pasuk literally contains the whole entire Torah and Vav, right? Now again, that's the beauty of the Rebbe Nachman's Torah. If you wouldn't have included this, Torah and Vav would have stood on its own because he already brought rise for everything. And all of a sudden, boom, he takes everything that he built, and he binds it up with one pasuk in Iya. I mean, Pele Ploim, Pele Elyon. Beruch Hashemayim Shifra, says the Rebbe. This is what the pasuk means. This is a reference to the ruach that's carried along by the blood. Hamanasha b'yadayim, which is blowing throughout the yadayim. Shemuchinas Shemayim, which is the aspect of Shemayim. So Beruchai Shemayim Shifra. When you have the ruach that clarifies Shemayim, what's Shemayim? Yadayim. What's Yadayim? Yadayim Askanias, right? We're cleansing that whole nekuda of needing to understand things, having my yadayim below my brain. No, I'm lifting my yadayim above my brain. I'm battling with Amalek. I'm accessing the nekuda of Shabbos Kodesh. Noach, Menucha, Zayanachaminu, Masinu, Umi, Itzvan, Yedeno, I'm getting out of the Yitzvah into Chalna, this Shishusami Amaisa, the Bezasa Pachatoy Chalech, Beruchai, Shamayim Shifra. Vizabachin is Berucha Shamayim Shifra, Ki Aidea Ruach Hadoife Canal, through the Ruach that emerges from the lave into the pulse, into the bloodstream. I'm able to cleanse and purify the heaven, Shema Yadayim, which is the Nekud of Yadayim, Bechinas Nesalav Avenu Al Kapayim, El Kel Bashamayim, and the aspect of the pasuk that we quoted earlier. I will lift my heart into my hands, and that will El Kel Bashamayim, that will purify the Shemayim. Obviously, right there, it's unbelievable. You couldn't have tailor-made this pasuk better. If you wanted to make up a pasuk, right, that didn't exist prior in Eov, that would capture the entire Nenvav, these are the words you would use. I mean, it couldn't be more perfect. It's exact. Mamish exact. The next pasuk speaks about the nachash. Chaylala yadai nachash bariach. Shal yedeza oisa chalal b'hayadayim. Chaylala. Not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fashioned, but chaylala means you want to make it mechaylal. You want to make it light, not heavy, weighed down, leaden, right? Like a weight, right? Which means that there's no hole. It's not hollow. All the veins and the capillaries, everything is clogged up like a blood clot. No, you want it to be hollow. You want the blood to flow, right? And that's the bechin of Chayla la yadai. Yadai, right? You just mentioned Shemayim. Yad Yamin, Yad Small. Shemayim. Now Chayla la yadai, on account of Beruchai Shemayim Shifra, that creates Chayla la yadai. Shal yadei za'oisa chalol ba'yadayim, the hands become emptied out. Shem kvedim, which were shahayu kvedim, which were prior leaden and weighed down, ustumim, and closed up al yedei atzvus ruach, on account of atzvus, on account of the ruach that wasn't being carried through. Shuzu amas hanachash k'nes kalel, which is the embodiment of the nachash. That's what the nachash embodies, the nachash hakadmoni, which later becomes Amalek. And then when we're able to be mevatel the zuam of the nachash v'ruach hadoifik menashiv keseder, and the taluchas hadamim, like the Rebbe calls it in Torah Bezin Tinyana, which we'll get to. It's also very connected. We'll get there, Be'ez Hashem. So the ruach hadoifik is menashiv keseder. The taluchas hadamim, the air is being carried throughout the whole system. Va'oz nis Nash in hayadayim and izdachich hashemayim. Then everything opens up, and the heavens, the bechin of the heavens is purified. V'azay mekabel behem diburim, and then you can be mekabel real diburim bebechinas machlokas l'shem shemayim. She says bechinas darchei Hashem, which is the ways of God. Then a person is able to access this consciousness of being able to realize, yes, metaphorically in my own life, the good things I went through and the really difficult, challenging things that I go through in life, even though the positive things that came later didn't mitigate the pain of what came earlier. It's not always that way. And when the pain is the pain, like we said, the Holocaust is the Holocaust, no matter what happens afterwards. That is there, right? Auschwitz is Auschwitz, remains Auschwitz. Yet I say Elu Divrei Kim Chai. Can't explain it. I'm not saying that what happens now means that the Holocaust was okay. Like Elu, but it's Divrei Kim Chai. Shtayim zu shamati, achas Divrei Kim. V'zeu hein elek soistrachav. This is the ksais drachav, meaning ksais. We're limited in our understanding of drachav, of his mysterious way. These are darchei Hashem. That Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Haydi'eni na es dirachecha." He wanted to know the drachim. Why is it that this tzaddik is saying this, and this Russia, and this tzaddik is saying that, and this Russia happens to be connected to the tzaddik saying the good, the right thing, and this Russia is connected to the tzaddik in halacha, and at the same time, that's the darchei Hashem. It's impossible for Moshe Rabbeinu to understand. Sheyev shalasik b'chinas ra'amim shem niflois t'mim deim kanal v'zeh u'mashemetz davar nishma boy v'ram guveroisa miyaz boy and haynashe ve'elu adiburim shemekabel ben hashamayim. Once it's in a kud of elek sois drachav, and we're able to catch a little bit of a glimpse of the mysterious way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created and runs this world. Ein b'hem shum gnus u'ma shemetz davar. Why should there be shemetz? Shemetz could also mean like impurity. There's no not to be mishametz. There's no shemetz davar. Emem shum gnus. Because it emerged from hein elek sois drachav. These are the darchei Hashem. These people are the shem shamayim. And to this one it appears this way, and to that one it appears this way. And elu divrei kim chaim. So uma shemetz davar. Nishma boy. Why should there be any shemetz? Why should there be any guilt and mud that's slung from here to there? Asr to be meganis, somebody who is literally mekabel diburim min hashamayim. Can't be meganis that. You're going to say, well, the other one also claims that he mekabel diburim min hashamayim. Yeah, that's possible, and it could be they're both right. That's the nekuda, right? It's not like no, but I had a magid come to me and tell me this. He also did. What? How? Pele, machloikas l'shem shamayim. Elu ve'elu divrei l'kim chayim. So there cannot be a shemetz davar. What do you want? He was mekabel it min hashamayim. If a person mamish feels that, again, after going through the sugya and clarifying things with no negiyas, and they live their life mamish surrounded by the Ratzon Hashem, and you can see that in their life, that's what they care about, that's what they spend their time on, that's their, and you get the sense, this person is mamish for real, and this is what he believes. Ein leganois. He was mekabel em in hashamayim, meaning misheishis mebereishis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in such a way that this person needed to be on this particular day in 2026, holding down the fort for that side of reality. I need to carry on, all the while that I'm not convinced by his perspective, with what I believe firmly, mamish for b'chol hatokev. And again, this is the nakuda. The fact that I believe what I believe b'chol hatokev shouldn't and doesn't necessarily need to mean that I can't hold space for him saying what he needs to say. Because we're connected to Kesser Elyon, I understand that I need to say what I need to say, and he needs to say what he needs to say. Why? Because then there's some kind of harmonious balance that's able to be produced. And I'm able to keep him in check, and he's able to keep me in check. And we need a Tanya, and we need a Sefer Nefesh Chaim. Like I say, learn those two things together, in my opinion. Right? It's the most glorious thing, and you're able to get that sense of balance. You know, Rebbe Leo Dessler, he bound up his Sefer Tanya and Nefesh Chaim in one volume. He took both of them. I tried to do that, but the edition that I have, I was thinking about doing that, but the edition that I have is, the Tanya is very like squat and short, and the Nefesh Chaim is too long, so I can't figure out how to do that. I would have to find an edition of Tanya that's the same size. Maybe not a terrible idea. Maybe one day. But that's what Rav Dessler did. He bound it together in one thing. Ultimate yichud. You know, it's not like Rav Itchel Morgenstern. His whole thing is synthesizing everything. I mean, he synthesizes everything there is. You know, one line he's quoting the Gra, he's quoting this, he's quoting Rav Kook. Oh, Rav Kook he doesn't quote. Actually, that's interesting. But he quote whoever you like. He quote in the same sentence. You know, to him is mamish. The whole thing is yichud, 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 yichud. That's Pella. That's Pella. That's the Pella. That's the Shalom Nifla. Shalom nifla ba'olam niflis tmim deim. So ein legano, somebody who's mekabel minash shamayim. Af im ein halacha kamoisa, even if it emerges that the halacha is not like him. Ki zebachin is darchi Hashem. This person is part of that hagav HaKadosh Baruch Hu unfolding in the world. You need to hold strong to what you hold strong to, and not to flinch, and at the same time hold space for someone else. Again, if that other person is on the level. If not, so then you have to do everything in your power to try to educate them, right? To try to educate them. But if you get the sense this is a tzaddik you're speaking to, then you respect. He comes from a different perspective, that's fine. That we can't really grasp. So what small thing, right? But we're learning now. Shemetz in this context means to be megane. Not to be megane, not to shame and not to put down. Even if halacha will not be like him objectively, and even though you subjectively in this moment are fairly certain that halacha is not like him, and you can't understand, it's fine. Not to be megane. Because Veram Gevuraisav mi is bainan, because it's all an inyan of thunder. Kimi yuchalahav and Ram Gevuraisav, because it's all the inyan of thunder. That is the hot air and the cool air that come together to produce this incredible thunderous revelation. And that's why thunder accompanies the Torah Kedosha, which is all about all about Anochi and La'iyah, all about the whole duality of reality that unfolds in the dialectic of the Shakla and the Tarya, in the Mekach and Memkar, in the marketplace of Torah ideas, both in Halacha and in Ashkafa. That's the way that Torah Shabbat Peh unfolds. That's how it has to unfold. That's Amloi Nevi'im He, B'nai Nevi'im He. Klal Yisrael evolved Torah Shabbat Peh, Daika on account of this, where we have different Ishamas, Keshem Shapar Tzafeim Shainis, Kach De'asem Einim Shavai. Our faces are different, our mentality is different. So let's go. Let's try to vie with each other to reveal the Ratzon Hashem. That's Torah Shabbat Peh. That's the thunder of Matan Torah. B'chinas in Yarem Hashem kel b'koil neflois. Yarem Hashem kel b'koil neflois. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will thunder forth wonders. Thunder. Right? Wonder forth thunders. We'll thunder forth wonders. I feel like Dr. Seuss. Because really the whole thing is just Divlikim Chaim. You can't fathom it. Because they're the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are Pele Elyon, Kesser Elyon, Pele. I'm reminded of a story that Rebbe Nachman one year came out of the mikvah on Shavuos morning, Sharnun, and he said to his attendant who was with him, the Gabbai, he said, "Do you hear it?" He says, "Hear what?" He says, you don't hear it? He says, "What are we hearing?" He says, "I hear a cappella. I hear an orchestra, a symphony." Beautiful. I hear a symphony. Which is unique, because you'd expect maybe he would hear the thunder and the lightning, he hears the noichi, he hears Matan Torah, he hears Mamish, Sharnun. No, that wasn't how Rebbe Nachman conceived of this revelation of multiplicity, duality that is the Torah Kedosha. Kelim, Psukim, Mitzvahs, Halachas, fighting, Achloikis, Bina, a cappella.
It's all part of this chord.
A symphony. And not because everything merges together beautifully. The Rebbe is able to listen to the most disjointed things and say that's also a symphony. How? I don't know. Can't. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. My hands are above my head. I'm giving it up to Hashem. I don't understand, but I believe it. I believe Hashem has enough trust with me, given the wonders that I see unfolding, that little humble me is able to take a back seat and say, I don't understand it. but I believe it to be true. Elu ve'elu divrei Elikim Chaim. V'zeh pirish. Again, I mean, just this is Niflas Tumim Deim. We're about to finish Rebbe Nachman's Shavuos, Torah, Erev Shavuos. And like, what are the chances? Literally, what are the chances of that? Like minuscule. Hashem is real. Hashem is with us in this room. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mom is walking with us all the time. V'zeh pirish, this is pshat in the pasuk, but this will end. U'v'yoyim ha'bikurim, on the day of the first fruits, right? Shavuos, when we bring the bikurim, zebechinas malchus. This is the nekuda of malchus. K'moshe kasav afani b'charat tanehu. Afani b'charat tanehu elyon lemalchei eretz, right? Malchus is associated with the bechar. How so? Malchus is the last sphere, yes, but malchus and kesser are linked up, which is also the oimek of this whole thing, machlekes Hashem Shemaim. The be'emes, it was all kesser all along. Even what goes on in Malchus, Eishes Chayil becomes a teres bala. We don't have time to go more deeply into that now. But that's the Nakud of Bechar. Malchus and Bechar. Kesser. Malchus, Kesser, Malchus, Kesser. Malchus, my own experience in this world, but it's only reflecting the Kesser Elyon Kila Shem Hamlucha. That's Bechar. When you bring the new grain offering, this is an akud of the Torah that you can reveal from inside the Hastaros. Torah's Hashem that comes about on account of Malchus, which is the synthesis between Arichas and the Yamim, and a person who's using that to help other people to be Megal the Hastara, like we learned in Mordechai and Esther, Hadassah, Shlemeser, Umaya Aseba, Bishvu Aisechem. When does this all culminate? Purim, Pesach Yitzis Mitzrayim, and then ultimately it culminates in Matan Torah on Shavuos. B'Shvu Aiseichen. Zebechinas Hadassah Keniskala, all the revelation of Das. Bechinas Man, the aspect of the Man, which is Parnasa B'Nakel. Bechinas Mikvah Shel Shavuos, Shehu Mikvah Shel Sharnon, which is the Mikvah of Sharnon. And if the Chavar are here tonight, as Hashem, are going to do some great learning together. And then toward the end of the night, we're going to walk as a group. And we'll go to Shara Hol Be'ez Hashem to the Mikvah there. Mikvah Shel Sharnon, it's going to be open. I checked. Keniskala Avial Kain Nikra Shavuos Atzeres. That's why Shavuos is called Atzeres, Meloshen Malchus, because it's a terminology for Malchus. Right? That's what Malchus is. Right? It is Yatzar. It gathers together. It collects. It's the Kapella. It's the symphony. It's the orchestra. That's what Malchus is. Mikra Kodesh Yilachem. Zabachin is Ruach HaKodesh. Bachin is Ruach HaDoifik. This is the Ruach HaKodesh, which is the Ruach HaDoifik. Hani Shetzichim Likrais Es HaKodesh. Mikra Kodesh. What was Mikra Kodesh? How do you bring Arichas Yamim down? Mikra by Kol Yamav Laman Yarech Yamim Amamlachtoi. Mikra Kodesh. But on Shavuos you have to call down to Kodesh, and that's the Nakuda of Ruach HaKodesh. Kadili Hinatzal Mizuamas Hanachash, to be saved from the Zuamas Hanachash, which we said is the Lamates Malachas Atzvus Ruach. So the next words in the pasuk is Kol Malachas Avaida Laisasu. When you're isn't that? I mean, come on. What is that? Like, I mean, you can just fall off your chair. Kol Malachas Avaida Laisasu, because when you have all of these bechinas, so then you've overcome the Lamatas Malachas. Kol Malachas Avaida Laisasu. You're battling against the Nachash. You're battling against Amalek. You're lifting your hands above your head, right? So that's Levatel Zomas Hanachash, Lamatas Malachas, Itzvan Yadayim, Kamashakasav Zeh Yinachamenu Nachman Mimasenu Umi Itzvan Yadeinu Hakol Kaniska El. Everything ends up being Kaniska El, like was said before in the Sheishis and Bereshis. Hakol Kaniska El. Everything goes back to Kaniska El, right? But of course, in a more limited way, he means Hakol Kaniska El. Everything works out. Taran and Vav is one tapestry. I think it's the longest series that we did. I think it's 12 Shiurim. Can I get the 12 Shvatim for sure? The 12 children of Yaakov Avinu. And Yaakov is Tam, and Yaakov is the Torah Kadosh, and Yaakov is Tiferes, and Tiferes is Das, and Das is Kesser, and Kesser becomes Malchus, and Malchus becomes Kesser, and this is the system. This is the unified system of Niflas Timim Deim, where things emerge and they synthesize or they don't synthesize, and certain things don't synthesize, and they're still one, because Shtayim Zu Shamati, I heard two things, but Achaz Dirilikim. Chevra, we spent a lot of time on Torah and Vav. We have not scratched the surface of what this Torah is. You can literally spend the rest of your life, if you didn't learn anything else in Sefer Likutei Moharan, or maybe even at all, but you should learn other things. But if you didn't learn any, just Torah and Vav. Just Torah and Vav. So really, we should recognize what we have. Appreciate the Omek, appreciate that we're learning Iyam Kal. And Baruch Hashem, I think we're doing a lot, and it's deep, and it is deep, but mamish hafach ba v'hafach ba v'hafach ba v'hafach ba v'hafach ba to kula ba hakol kaniske le'el. Hadron alach. Taran and Vav, Ahadra Chalan, Daitan Alach, Taran and Vav, Daita Chalan. Thank you, Hashem, that we merited right before Shavuos to finish the Heilige Taran and Vav, Rebbe Nachman Shavuos Torah. Looking forward to learning with the Chaver locally here tonight, and Mikvah Be'ezras Hashem of Shar Nun in the morning, with all these concepts fresh in our minds and in our hearts, so we should be Meechal the Torah, Mitach Simcha V'Tov Levav. Good Yantiv, good Yantiv, good Yantiv. Thank you so much.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני